Good evening, everyone. So today we will be talking about Xavier Aptitude Test, that is XAT 2026, which will be conducted on 4th of January 2026. Now, Xavier Aptitude Test, as we all know, is conducted by XLRI every year for admission into their flagship programs, that is PGDM HRM, PGDM BM, and PGDM GMP program, right? So I've talked about these courses in one of the previous sessions, right? Uh, Now, what exactly is this test? What do they test in these exams? And what is the syllabus, the exam pattern? We'll talk about the cutoffs. And then in the end, I will leave you with some preparation strategies, right? In between, if you guys have any doubts or anything, you can post it on the live chat and I'll be answering them, right? All right. Let's first dig deep into the pattern of the exam, right? The exam structure and the pattern. Now, Xavier Aptitude primarily tests not just knowledge, but decision-making skills. Also, it will be more about practical application of whatever you have learned or whatever concepts you've tried to understood. Uska practical application is what is tested in the XAT exam. Therefore, I like personally the XAT exam a little better than any other entrance exam because it just tests students on multiple levels, right? Now, the exam is divided into two parts. The first part is, or the first part contains three sections. The first one being verbal ability and logical reasoning, so which is VALR. Now, it of course includes the entire syllabus of verbal ability and reading comprehension that we have discussed earlier. It also contains critical reasoning as an important part of this section, right? It has a total of 26 questions. The second section is the decision-making section, which is new and unique. When I say new, I mean to say it is different from all the other exams, something that you will not do for any other exam, right? So there are 21 questions on decision-making, and we will talk about it more in detail at a later point in time. The third section is the quantitative ability and data interpretation. Now here, the syllabus obviously has all the topics that are covered in the quantitative ability. And again, we will see these in more detail. The section will also have some question on data interpretation. Those questions on graph or calculation intensive TI is what you will see over here. And the section contains a total of 28 questions, right? Now, decision making, on some years, we've seen that the number of question varies from 21 to 22. So accordingly, you can see that total number of questions in part one is somewhere around 75 to 76, right? In the last few years, we've seen the questions to be 76 in total, right? For which you have 170 minutes of time duration with no sectional time limit. What I mean to say is you have 170 minutes timer on your screen with a total of 76 questions section wise, and you can choose to answer any number of questions at any point in time, right? You can shuffle between questions as many times as you want, right? This, of course, means then that your strategy for this paper will be very different from what you might have prepared for CAT, in the sense that it gives you a little bit of leeway to play around with the time, right? So and there are two ways usually in which people approach this. For someone who's good with verbal ability and logical reasoning, let's assume that there's a section of people who are good with VLR, a section of people who are good with, let's say, QA and DI. Now, some people would want to spend more time on VALR because it is their strength and they would want to maximize their score in that particular section. So they would utilize, let's say, 70 minutes in that section, for example, which means that now they have only 100 minutes for QADI and decision making. And you see QADI has 28 questions. So such a huge section actually requires around 1 hour of time. right? So you, let's say, take 1 hour for QADI and you're left with 40 minutes of decision making, which more or less is a good enough time for attempting that section. Uh, Keeping in mind that you are good with reading, etc., and therefore VLR is your strength. So that kind of a strategy works well for them. The second kind of people is who would want to use less time in VLR, knowing that it is a strength section, and therefore they would not have to rethink much, and they would not have to go through the questions again or the paragraphs again, and they would just run through the section very easily, right? So in such cases, they take very less time for VLR, let's say about 50 minutes. And then they, of course, complete decision making also in about 35-40 minutes, which leaves them easily with about 90 minutes for quantitative ability and DI. Right. Now you see for someone who's, let's say the weaker is weaker at QA and DI, for them 90 minutes give them a lot of time to, pick and choose what all they want to attempt, what all they want to leave out, and they have enough time to attempt those questions, probably more than 3 to 4 minutes per question, even if they try to attempt 20, right? So you see, that gives them a lot of time. So that kind of a strategy also works in some cases. Now, for you, it is of course suggested that you, give a lot of mocks and see what strategy fits your way of taking the test, and then go ahead with that. So you will have to do a lot of hit and trial with these strategies and see what works best for you, right? So those 170 minutes, the point that there is no sectional time limit, you should utilize that in planning how much time you want to devote to that section. Another strategy, and which is a little more defensive strategy that a lot of students apply, is they allot first 40 minutes to each of the sections. What I mean to say is, let's say decides to go for VLR, DM, and QA in that order, and will allot 40 minutes for each of the three sections. 120 minutes gone. And the remaining 50 minutes will then be used to see or to check whichever section requires more time. So let's say while going through all the questions in the first 40 minutes per section, I realized that QADI is, comparably easy. And therefore, if I can give another 20 to 30 minutes, I can solve, let's say, 10, 12 questions more. So I would go ahead and do that, right? The first 40 minutes to each section ensures that I have, cleared the cutoff for each section. I would do only those many questions which is required to clear the cutoff, and then use the remaining time to maximize my score in one or two sections, not going to the third section again. Right, so that is a little more defensive approach where you basically, first of all, try to get a minimum cutoff score and then try to maximize in whichever section you feel like you can go ahead and do it. Right. So these are the strategies that you can work upon. Now, second part, and you get 10 minutes for second part, where you have 20 questions from GK to be done in 10 minutes. Now, last year, XAT or XLRI, the admission body themselves, said that they would be giving 12 questions on current affairs and 8 on static GK, right? Something of that sort. So this year, again, we expect that, something similar will be done. So you can say about 40 to 60% of questions from static and from current affairs, right? So it will be a fair mix of both. And you'll have 20 questions to be done in 10 minutes. So in total, you see a total of 95 to 96 questions are to be attempted in a time duration of 3 hours, 1 hour 8 or 180 minutes, right? Now, understand that your percentile calculation for that is dependent on the scores that you have received in part 1 only, right? That is the first three sections: VALR, decision making, and QADA. Your score for GK is not utilized for your percentile calculation. In fact, that score is used towards the end while calculating the merit list, right? So if there's a tie between student, they usually use the score as a tiebreaker, or in the end, they take a final decision how to use the score towards the end, and it is used usually at the time of preparation of merit list. right? So currently you need not worry too much about GK, but you should get a good enough score to not give you a disadvantage. So even if you get, let's say, 50% marks, 7, 8 plus score of 8 plus in out of 20, I think you should be well placed, right? Of course, if you score more, that always gives you an advantage and upper hand, right? This also, the score of GK sometimes also impacts your interview as well. So you should keep that in mind as well. So if you have a very low score in GK, the interviewer, of course, who will have your scores, will know that you probably did not concentrate on GK as much and might grill you in an interview, right? Now, that is about the exam structure and pattern of XAT. Let's move on to the marking scheme, which is +1 for correct answers, minus 0.25 for incorrect answers. Now, you are allowed to not attempt only 8 questions in the entire paper. Mark that, 8 questions in the entire paper, not per section. This in total 8 questions. And these are not consecutive 8 questions. These are 8 questions in the entire paper in any way, right? So you're only allowed to leave 8 questions. Beyond that, if you leave any question, you get minus 0.1 for every question that was unattempted beyond 8. Beyond 8. So if you, let's say, did not attempt 10 questions in the entire paper, for the first 8, you do not get any negative marking. For the rest 2, you get minus 0.1 for both the questions. So a total of minus 0.2, right? The GK section does not have any negative marking. So of course, it is suggested that you go ahead and mark all the answers, right? Now, again, some people ask me, so what should be the strategy for a number of questions to be attempted? Now, understand, and the question usually arises because of the marking scheme over here. But understand, this marking scheme should not change anything about your strategy. Because if you do not know an answer, you might still be tempted to attempt it because you might think that it will any which ways get you minus 0.1. But understand, it is still better than getting a 0.25 negative, right? So if you're absolutely unsure about the questions, do not attempt it at all, right? Yeah, you can take a few educated guesses if you are, some partial guesswork, some, intelligent guesswork. If you want to make, you can, go here with lesser risk. But otherwise, your strategy should not change much over here. Now let's move on to the individual sections. Let's start with verbal and logical ability, that is VLR, right? Now, first of all, let's see the VA section. Now, this is something that we already prepare for CAT, so should not be something different in terms of XAT. However, understand that a XAT paper, when you compare the English section of both the papers, the language section of both the papers, uh, XAT will be more vocabulary intensive. Generally, we see the passages and the words that we get in a XAT paper are more vocabulary intensive compared to CAT, meaning to say there would be more instances where you will find a word which you do not know the exact meaning of, right? So it becomes very important that you try and learn the art of getting the contextual meaning of words, right? And this is especially useful in case of your RCs, right? So try and get a grasp of how to understand the contextual meaning of the word. So if you read the sentence, even if you don't know the exact meaning of the word, you should be knowing what the sentence actually means. Right. Now, coming to the syllabus, you see antonyms, synonyms, usually you get 0 to 1 question. In the last few years, we haven't seen antonyms and synonyms given in that, but sometimes they give 1 question. The grammar question is a very common question that you get in that. You usually get 2 to 3 grammar questions in every XAT paper. Usage of words is basically filling in the blanks with the right word. So yeah, yes, sometimes you get a question on that as well. Para jumbles is something that you get every year. At least one or two questions you will get every year from para jumbles, something again that you prepare for CAT as well. Sentence completion, you get one question. Again, sentence completion can be through the usage of grammar or usage of correct words, or it could also be filling in a missing sentence, right? Completion of paragraph. So that can also be given over here. Para summary is again something that we do for CAT, and you can expect that in XAT as well, right? When we come to RC, we usually see 4 to 5 RCs in total, out of which one is a poem, right? So you get at least one poem in every XAT. In some cases, we've seen two poems as well, with 2 to 3 questions each. Comprehensions are usually short comprehensions with 3 to 4 questions. Usually they give 3 questions, 3 to 4 questions per RC. And as I said, it's more vocabulary intensive. So you will have to focus on your reading a bit more, right? The reading part, you have to be comfortable with reading difficult passages, right? Now, something that is going to work in your benefit is preparation of critical reasoning. And you usually get 4 to 5 questions from critical reasoning. So you have to prepare for critical reasoning. Now, I've seen people, once they prepare for critical reasoning, uh, the grasp on RC improves a lot, right? So while you will be preparing for critical reasoning, automatically you also will be preparing to get better at reading comprehension. So that should help you a little bit more. Now, critical reasoning are passages where you get an argument from the author, and which obviously contains a premise and a conclusion. And you get questions where you actually have to find out what is the conclusion, or you have to find out the assumption on which the conclusion is based, or you have to strengthen or weaken the argument. So all of these kinds of questions that you get in critical reasoning, you should prepare all of them sincerely. Easily 4 to 5 questions you can get out of critical reasoning, right? So the cutoff usually goes around 11 to 13 out of 26, as I said, +1 for the correct answers and negative 0.25 for incorrect ones. So you usually get 11 to 13 as the cutoff, but let's understand that a score of 14 is what you should be targeting over here. At least a score of 14. Because yes, you can clear the cutoff at a lower score, maybe even at 10, but then you will not have that mileage of clearing the final interview and get into the merit list, right? So you get interview calls at 94, 95 percentiles as well. For let's say HR, you get it at above 94 percentile, 93 percentile. For BM, you get it above 95 percentile if you clear all the sectional cutoffs. But it becomes very difficult to convert these calls at 95, 96 percentile, right? So you should be targeting, if you want to clear XAT properly and get into XLRI, 98 percentile is the minimum that you should target in an exam like XAT. And for that, you should target at least 14 in this section, around 14, right? Now, let's come to decision making. Now, this is something new. This is something that you have not done for any other exam. But these are what? These are basically small caselets where a situation has been explained, and you have to take a decision based on whatever has been given in the passage, right? There will be some information, some background given, some characterization done for different characters, and you have to be one of those characters and take a decision, right? Uh, and usually what we see is that there are 4 options, out of which in some cases all four are correct, but then you have to find out the best possible decision that the person has to take or should take. So yes, it is a difficult section if you do not practice this section enough. A lot of people argue that decision making is more of common sense and you can just ace the exam if you just use your common sense. But I have a very different opinion about this because, common sense is partially biased because of our experiences. And that is what is not expected in this particular exam, and particularly this section. You have to make decisions which are practically possible, which are ethically correct, and which obviously serves the goal that the question is asked, right? So a perfect balance has to be maintained in among the three things, and you have to prioritize one over the other sometimes according to the question itself. So it becomes very important that you first of all understand the situation, the passage that is given to you, and then you put yourself in the shoes of the character that has to make the decision, and then practically see what is the right decision, right? Which is ethically correct as well, right? Now, there are three types of questions or passages that you get. One is a management related issue. So you can have an actual business case in front of you. It could be related to an HR department problem, or it could be related to some business problem, right? You also get ethical dilemma questions, right? And now these are uh, something that, sometimes you will very comfortably feel that this should be the correct answer, but in fact, that would not be the correct answer, right? And that is where you have to understand the difference between not just what is legal, but what is ethical and what is absolutely unethical, right? Where is that line? You have to have a clear understanding of that. Right? So these are questions that you should definitely practice before you go into the exam. Critical reasoning questions. Again, these are an extension of what we already discussed. Here you can also have social dilemma questions or social issues where you will have to make your point and give your decision, right? So this is a section which usually is the make or break section of that, because again, people who go in with the idea that it's going to be uh, just based on common sense, uh, it really is not. And you will realize once you have appeared for the paper. And to my audience as well, I mean, some of you might have also appeared for that before, and you would have, once you've attempted this section, you would have understood that this is not just common sense. A lot of technicality is also applied over here, right? Sure. Let's move on to the next section. Before that, I would just see if there are any questions. Okay, Lavisha asks, marks in 10th is 10, 12, 76, BCom 77. Yeah, Lavisha, you definitely have a chance at XLRI. So, I, being an alum of XLRI, I can tell you that in my batch, we had a person who had a 67% in 12th and 7%, 7 GPA in their undergrad, and was a fresher with 1 year of gap. And he also converted XLRI. So he was also here with a 98 plus percentile, right? So yes, it is definitely possible. For more understanding, you should check the, criterias or the weightage that the college gives to various things. To briefly tell you, for the interview call, they will only see your XAT percentile if you clear the cutoffs, the sectional cutoffs and the overall cutoffs, and your minimum eligibility criteria that is already meeting, then you should get a call for the interview. Once your interview is done, they give approximately 50 to 60% weightage to the XAT exam, about 30% weightage to your interviews, and your essay and the GD process that they are going to take. And then last 20% is kept for your profile, and which is where you will get some marks less, of course, compared to someone who will have a 998 profile or a 999 profile. But then that will be manageable with a good XAT percentile and interview score. Easily manageable. Yeah, but you should definitely target 98 plus percentile if you really want to have a chance at it. Vipul, if you're scoring less in VALR, I believe you should focus a little bit more on critical reasoning and RCs. That is where you will be able to score more. Uh, Less than 10 is a very tough spot to be at, because you might not clear the cutoff by 1 or 2 marks, right? At a score of 9 or 8, you might just miss the cutoff. And once you miss the cutoff, you have no shot at XLRI. So yeah, definitely target and practice questions on critical reasoning and RC. These two things I think will pull your score up to 12, 13. And the scores that you have in the remaining two section means that you will easily have a call from XLRI. Your percentile should also cross 95, 97 easily if you get a score of 13, 14 in your VLR section. So overall, if you get 40 plus, you should be safe for a 97 percentile approximately. Easily 97, 98 percentile if you get a score of 40. Right. So let's come back to our QADI section. We will be talking about 28 questions over here. Now, the cutoff score in this section is about 12 to 14 out of 28. Now, it's very easy with a very strategic approach. You can get 12 to 14 marks easily in this. You see, you will again have 4 to 6 questions, approximately 5 questions from arithmetic and 4 to 5 from algebra. So मान के चलो about 10 questions from arithmetic and algebra, right? And then you have your data interpretation questions, about 10 to 12 questions you get from data interpretation, where you get graphs, tables, Venn diagrams, caselets, not those logic-based DI questions, but pure DI questions, which are either calculation intensive or based on graphs, etc. Right? So these are questions that you would want to focus on a lot more. If you can get these 10, 12 questions from DI and those 10 questions from arithmetic and algebra, you have approximately 20 questions covered for you. And with that, you can easily get a score of 15, right? For people who are good with mathematics, this is where you can get a score of 25 plus, because the difficulty level is going to be absolutely at par with CAT itself. And we know CAT relatively is, the QA section is relatively easier when compared to something like a DILR. Moreover, you have easy questions from DI in this section, which helps you just increase your score even further. Right, so people who are good with section, people are planning to maximize your score, you can easily get 25 in this section, and you should give enough time to this section. Easily you can give up to 75, 80 minutes to this section if this is your strength. Right? Now, let's understand the overall approach of attempting the paper. Now, the overall cutoff for XAT to get an interview call will be somewhere around 32 to 33. Okay, 32, 34K range mein the overall score cutoff is for getting a call from XLRI. But you have to understand that, as I said, a score of 32 to 34 is somewhere around 94, 95 percentile. At that percentile, it is extremely difficult to convert the call. Right. So for you guys, for those of you who are going to give that seriously and want to take a shot at XLRI, target a score of 40, which guarantees you more or less a score of or a percentile of 98 plus, which gives you an absolutely brilliant chance to convert the call. Right? And therefore, in individual sections, you should target about 13, 14, a score of 13, 14 in each section. And then choose one section where you will want to maximize your score and get, let's say, a 20, a score of 20 or something. In my case, I did it for decision making and I was able to score 20 in decision making. Uh, Similarly, I was able to score good in QADI, and therefore I was able to balance VALR ka score. I did not do extremely well in VLR, but it was balanced because I could score in the other two sections. Right. So therefore, my percentile was at a level where I knew that I would convert this college. And so that is the kind of paper that you want to give. Understand that 3 hours, or in fact 170 minutes of total time is more than enough to attempt all 76 questions. And you will realize that a lot of people are actually going to attempt more than 70 questions. Right? Because the time limit is enough to attempt all questions. So here you do not have a cushion where, the time is limited, so no one will be able to attempt all questions. Right? Just like we have in CAT, there's a cushion that no one will be able to attempt all 66 questions or 68 questions. But here you do not have that cushion. So which means you will have to prepare in depth, right? A more understanding of concepts is required. Uh, you have to understand the application of concepts because in the end, if you do not know a lot of questions, in the end, there will be a lot of time remaining and you will just waste that time. So depth has to be there in this preparation. However, this exam is something that you will uh, be able to clear with a lot of strategic approach towards your preparation. As I said, they are very specific about the kind of paper they prepare. And if you just prepare accordingly, you should be able to clear the paper, right? Uh, Talking about preparation strategy, I would just briefly mention what you should be going ahead and doing for the next 40 days. Uh, I understand a lot of you will be appearing for CAT. So for those of you who are appearing for CAT, you can continue doing this right after CAT from, let's say, 1st of December. But for others, I believe you can, if you're not giving CAT, I think you should do this kind of a preparation on a daily basis. Something that I followed after my CAT exam. So I focused on critical reasoning a lot. Questions like finding conclusions, assumptions, inferences, etc. Uh, Easily you get 5 to 6 questions from critical reasoning and you get all of them correct if you just practice enough number of questions. And it also helps improve your RC. So comparatively, I was able to improve on my RC a lot because of critical reasoning. So I used to practice 3 RCs along with critical reasoning questions daily. Uh, and verbal ability, I used to solve around 20 questions on a daily basis. Out of which some are grammar questions, para completion, para jumbles, and sentence completion. These kind of questions I would practice a lot. Now, I used to solve DM very regularly, and that is where I was able to score great marks in DM. I used to solve 7 sets of DM, 3 questions each on a daily basis. Now, for this, I understand that the resources, credible resources for DM is very less available on the internet. In fact, any other source also. Credible sources are very few, right? We have a lot of other books that give DM questions, but you will realize they're very different from what XAT gives. So I used to again go through multiple sources and solve DM questions. Uh, uh, of course, now we provide from our end at Time, we provide a many resources for DM, separate handouts, etc. All of those things for DM. So now we have enough material for DM to practice. So yes, that should definitely be done. You should definitely go through different resources as well. What is important is that you analyze each option after solving the questions. You should understand the logic behind every decision rather than just concluding it to be common sense. Right. So try to understand the logic behind the correct answers. And also the logic why a particular answer was not the best answer. Right. Also go through previous year papers because that is the best resource that you will get for dealing. Right. Now for QADI, for those of you who are already preparing for CAT, for that you just need to revise all the topics, all the concepts and its application, right? You don't have to go through every question again and again, but you just solve a few number of questions that you know you were facing issues previously. Just revise all those concepts. Approximately 20 questions you pick up from various topics and you solve them daily, right? If you can get hands on a sectional test for QA, you can give one sectional test on a daily basis and keep revising your topics. Along with that, give one sectional test for DI as well. About 15 to 20 questions from DI if you practice daily. So overall, you see, you are basically solving one XAT paper on a daily basis along with analysis. It's about 60 to 70 questions I've told you to practice on a daily basis. That is something if you can do for the next 1 month, I think you will be good to go for clearing XAT. Right. Uh, any questions from your end? If you have any questions, I'll be ready to take those questions now. Okay. So Lavisha, no, essay writing is not a part of the XAT exam. Since last year, they have gotten away with this thing. Now essay writing is a part of your GDPI process, so it will not be a part of your XAT exam. It will be just like other colleges or IIMs where essay writing is a part of your uh, GDPI process. Yeah. Any other questions or queries if you guys have, you can let me know. I'll wait for another minute. If not, then I think we are good to go for today's session. All right, then that is it for today. Thank you, guys.